Every year, hundreds of new movies are released. In fact, while the exact number is not known, it's estimated that there have been approximately 500,000 feature-length fiction movies created today. You might think that with so many movies in the world, it would be easy to slip any old thing into the pile and just hope that nobody notices. Obviously, this would never be the goal, as the whole point of movies is to make money, or in rare instances, the artistic vision of the writer and or director. But if the likes of Birdemic and Frankenhooker are allowed to exist, then clearly there can't be a movie that's just too terrible to at least make back some of the cost of production. Right? That's actually probably true. Terrible movies are released all the time, even if the release date is moved around to correspond with the slowest possible release schedule to attempt to maximize what meager profits they'll make. Even so, there are a surprising amount of movies that never get released. Usually this isn't related to the quality of the film, though that is one of the many reasons that a film will go unseen. Of course, not all of the films that we'll be discussing today have been unseen either. Some of these have been circulated as bootlegs for decades, despite never officially being released. There are few names in all of cinema as terrifying as Roger Corman. He directed a lot of movies in a surprisingly short period of time, and to call most of them B-movies would be generous. In the 1980s, German producer and director Bernd Eichinger purchased the movie rights to the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer from Marvel. This is fairly notable for two reasons. The first is that it was before comic book movies were popular, big-budget affairs. The second is that this was about a decade before Marvel needed to sell movie rights to popular characters in a desperate attempt to dig their way out of bankruptcy, so Eichinger would have had to actively seek them out to negotiate a deal. He and Corman were both low-budget specialists. That doesn't necessarily mean they were great at making high-quality movies on the cheap, just that they were experienced at making cheap movies. Varying accounts of why exactly the Fantastic Four from 1994 was never released. One version of events is that the movie was never intended to be released in the first place. Eichinger had clearly intended to make a movie when he sought out the rights, but he was obligated to make a film based on the property in a certain amount of time in order to maintain the movie rights. Many believe that he hired Corman to just throw any old shit together so that he could maintain the rights long enough to resell them to someone else at a considerable profit. However, Corman and Eichinger tell a different story. Corman claimed that he was contracted to direct and release the movie, and his contract had to be bought out by Eichinger. Eichinger doesn't dispute this, but he also claims that Marvel is responsible for the movie never being released. The theatrical trailer for the film was playing in the summer of 1993, and it was even included on some home VHS tapes. The premiere of the movie had to be pushed back, but it was rescheduled to be at the Mall of America in January of 1994, with the profits going to children's charities. A cynic could argue that the trailer and any other ad run were just to play up the existence of the movie so that they wouldn't lose the rights, but this seems unlikely. It would take a special kind of sociopath to promote a movie premiere that would benefit children's charities while having no intention of actually showing the movie. By Eichinger's account, a Marvel executive called him up and said in so many words, "Your movie is and it will ruin our intellectual property, we will pay you not to release it." As for the movie itself, it's certainly not great. It's clearly low budget and it suffers from poor pacing. However, it feels like the actors and crew really cared about the project, and with the proper resources, they could have made it a good movie. The actors actually cared so much that they hired a publicist with their own money to help promote the film at the San Diego Comic-Con and in print ads, though they ultimately received a cease and desist order to prevent them from doing any further promotion of the movie. Fantastic Four was screened only once on the 31st of May 1994, and for years it remained an extremely popular bootleg. Commissioned by Remy Martin, one of the oldest and largest producers of cognac in the world, 100 Years was written by acclaimed actor John Malkovich and directed by Robert Rodriguez. Malkovich stars as the male protagonist and is accompanied by Taiwanese actress Shuya Chang as the female protagonist and Chilean actor Marco Zaror as the antagonist. So, what happens when a liquor company assembles an international cast of talented actors to make a movie? Well, we have basically no idea. The film was announced in 2015 with the tagline, "The movie you will never see." And that's because its premiere date isn't until November the 18th, 2115. The gimmick is that Remy Martin's Louis XIII cognac needs to be aged for 100 years before being served, so their film would be aged for the same amount of time. There were 3 trailers produced, titled Nature, Retro, and Future. We say 3 trailers, but They're virtually identical. The action and dialogue is the same in all three. The setting is just modified to different visions of what the world might look like 100 years from now. The only information revealed thus far, other than the main cast and a vague description of their roles, is that it's a short film. Quite possibly very short. Rodriguez had been contracted by Remy Martin to make several short films. 100 Years is the first one they filmed and produced, and in 2019, in an interview, he revealed that he was shocked when they said they were locking it away. He had assumed it would be used as a commercial, and that a future film was the one they intended to save for 100 years. Currently, the movie is being held in the Louis XIII cellars in an electronic safe hidden behind bulletproof glass. The safe will automatically open on the date in 2115 when the film will be premiered for 1,000 guests. They've even already given out the tickets. 1,000 invitations to the premiere made out of metal were given to various guests from around the world, including Malkovich and Rodriguez. Of course, no one who received these invitations will be alive for the film's inaugural showing, but the invitations can be passed down to their descendants. When people think of Jerry Lewis, they think of the Nutty Professor, some sort of slapstick comedian. They don't think of a serious drama set in the Holocaust, and if Lewis had his way, they never would. Lewis was approached by producer Nat Waxberger to direct and star in a script he had that was titled The Day the Clown Cried. Lewis was not the first star that had been approached with this offer, but the others had all turned it down. He was reluctant, but after giving the script a second read-through, he decided to go for it. He would get to direct and star, and Waxberger had offered him a blank check to produce the movie. Unfortunately for Lewis, the blank check was actually only about $5,000. Despite constant promises that money was coming, Waxberger, who never once visited the set, failed to deliver. Undeterred, Lewis spent $2 million of his own money so that they could complete the film. Once the film was complete, all there was left to do was sit down and watch what he had created. Perhaps he was pleased with it at first, because there were two different things going on that led to the film never being released. The first was all the money that Waxberger never paid anyone. He had paid an initial fee of $5,000 to scriptwriters Joan O'Brien and Charles Denton, but never paid the remaining $50,000 to secure the rights. This would be a huge roadblock, particularly because Lewis had done a fairly dramatic rewrite of the original script. Because Waxberger didn't fully secure the rights, Lewis was going to need the author's approval to release the film. O'Brien was shown the rough cut of the film, hoping it would get her to give over the rights, but she was appalled. She referred to the movie as a disaster, and she and Denton agreed that they would never allow the film to be released. Chief among their complaints was that Lewis had made the main character more sympathetic, whereas he was intended to be a completely unlikable piece of shit. Perhaps this rejection gave Lewis some clarity about what he had created. Despite originally seeking the writer's approval to release the script, he decided that it should never be seen by anyone and locked it away in a vault. For decades, he would be asked in interviews, and he would remain consistent that no one would ever see it because it was unwatchably terrible. But what exactly was this movie even about? Fortunately, both the original script and Lewis's rewrite are available online. Most people agree that while the rewrite makes it dramatically worse, neither script has any business seeing the light of day. Still, thanks to the full scripts, interviews, and some behind-the-scenes footage from the movie, we know exactly what it's about. The Day the Clown Cried is the story of Helmut Dork, a once famous clown whose skills and fame have dramatically declined. After getting fired from the circus, he gets drunk at a bar where he starts bad-mouthing Hitler and is subsequently arrested and sent to a concentration camp. Once there, Helmut tries to win favor with the other prisoners by bragging about what a famous clown he used to be. They get him to perform for them, but he is genuinely terrible, so they just beat him up instead. However, he notices the Jewish children on the other side of the barbed wire fence watching his performance and decides to perform for them in a desperate attempt to get any positive attention. Little did Helmut realize, but fraternizing with the Jews was against the rules. The guards beat him, and then they realize they can use him. Helmut is made to perform and lead the children onto a train to Auschwitz. He accidentally remains on the train for the journey, where he is eventually used to lead the children into the gas chambers. Not wanting them to be left alone, he decides to join them. So yeah, it's a happy movie about the Holocaust in which a clown marches children to their deaths. How could anyone have foreseen a script like that could go wrong? The movie is regarded as the holy grail of unreleased films, given the subject matter, the incongruous star, and the entire story surrounding it. In 2015, Lewis donated his rough cut, believed to be the most complete version of the film in existence, to the Library of Congress with explicit orders that they don't screen it until 2024. That date is rapidly approaching, so the world, at last, may finally get to see this famous movie. There are some that have even seen Lewis's cut, and the nearly universal opinion is that it's not fit for human heroin consumption, with one major exception. If there is one group of people who've always appreciated Jerry Lewis, even when no one else could stand him, it was the French. The famous French film critic and historian of cinema, Jean-Michel Fredon, has seen the movie, and he absolutely loved it. Given the scathing reviews of not only everyone else who's seen the film, but the creator as well, it would be fair to call this review a little bit of an outlier. Fans of the Rolling Stones will recognize that title as being from an unreleased song that they wrote in 1970. They were contractually obliged to write one more song under Decca Records, who they hated working with, so they deliberately wrote a song that couldn't be released due to the graphic and vulgar nature of the lyrics. When a movie about the band was barred from being released, it was naturally the immediate choice for the movie's title. Cocksucker Blues was the work of photographer and documentarian Robert Frank. He had been commissioned to do the artwork for the band's latest album, Exile on Main Street, and to follow them on their 1972 tour promoting the album. It was the first time the Rolling Stones had been to America since a 1969 incident when a concert goer was stabbed and beaten to death by a member of the Hells Angels, an act that was caught on camera. The Rolling Stones loved Frank's work, so when they asked him to join them on tour, they gave him complete access to everything backstage and on tour, an offer they would later regret making. Frank didn't really care about the music and was mainly interested in the band themselves. He filmed the movie on a handheld Super 8 camera and also had several more available, so anyone in attendance could pick one up and start filming whatever they wanted as well. When the final cut was prepared and shown to the band and their entourage, they were not pleased. There's rampant drug use, including Mick Jagger smoking marijuana and snorting cocaine, and even a scene of a groupie shooting heroin. The film includes every sex act imaginable. And it also occasionally shows them up on stage playing music. Upon seeing the film for the first time, Jagger is claimed to have said, "It's a fucking cool film, Robert, but if it shows in America, we'll never be allowed in the country again." The band sued Frank before the film could be released on the basis of copyright ownership. Since Jagger had commissioned the movie, he felt that it was the property of the band. Because he was the creator, Frank felt that the copyright should belong to him. The court sided with the band and ruled that it could not be shown until 1979, 7 years after the intended release. The judge also added some rather odd stipulations. Seeming to acknowledge that Frank deserved at least partial ownership of the work, the judge ruled that after those 7 years, it could be shown no more than 4 times per year. The documentary could also only be shown somewhere Frank was present and only with the permission of the band. The movie has never had any sort of theatrical or home release, but bootlegs have been circulating for over 40 years, and Frank continued to show it up to 4 times per year until his death in 2019. Despite the very raw nature of the film and the endless barrage of adult content, every time Frank did show the movie, it always began with a room full of laughter. Never once in court nor in interviews did the Rolling Stones dispute anything that happened in the documentary as being real. It would be borderline impossible to even attempt to make that claim. However, there was one final piece of the judge's unusual ruling. Before the footage begins, there's a disclaimer shown on screen. Except for the musical numbers, the events depicted in this film are fictitious. No representation of actual persons and events is intended. Jerry Lewis may not have found a lot of laughs in his Holocaust drama, but at least Robert Frank was able to find one here.